world we live in today is quite special. Special in the sense that we're all connected in one way or another. For example, you could easily buy a plane ticket and get to the other side of the world in less than a day, or use technology to send a video of your cat to your relatives in Minnesota. But the world wasn't always like this. Many important events and movements led to the development of the world we know and sometimes love. Today, we will look at one of them. Colonialism occurs when one nation subjugates another nation, often forcing their culture and language upon the local population. Colonialism is a policy that closely relates to imperialism, but they do differ slightly. Imperialism is about controlling a country or countries, often with military forces, while colonialism is more about expanding the host country's influence and setting up colonies. The motivation for colonialism could often be boiled down to three things: God, gold, and glory. God in the sense that European colonizers believed that it was their duty to spread Christianity and its teaching. Gold in the sense that colonizers wanted to find trading routes and untap natural resources. And glory in the sense that there was a bit of a competition between European nations to see who could set up the most colonies. Though colonialism was practiced in ancient times by ancient empires such as the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians, we'll be only focusing on colonialism during and after the Age of Discovery. In the 15th century, Portugal began looking for new trading routes and civilizations. This led to the conquest of North Africa, where Portugal managed to colonize some coastal territories and islands. This kick-started modern colonialism. Spain, now envious of Portugal's success, sent out missionaries of their own. One of those missionaries was Christopher Columbus, the first known European to land on the shores of America. As a result of that, Spain managed to set up colonies in the Bahamas and Caribbean. Soon after, other European nations such as England, the Netherlands, France, and Germany sent out missionaries of their own, in the hopes of finding new land, new trading routes, and set up colonies of their own. This whole sequence became known as the first wave of colonial expansion. The second wave of colonial expansion would come during the 19th century. It would center around the African continent in what was known as the Scramble for Africa. European nations such as England, France, Portugal, and Spain divided up the African continent, creating border and boundaries while claiming large swaths of land for themselves. But that wasn't all that happened. The practice of colonialism did not come without its fair share of ramifications, positive and negative. Host countries often invested into their colonies into areas such as infrastructure or trade. Oftentimes, they would share their medical practices and technology as well, technologies such as guns, transportation, and agricultural instruments. And in some specific case, host countries even pushed for the adoption of human rights standards, democratic practices, and governmental institutions. These were the positive effects of colonialism, but with the positives also came the negatives. Colonies could not be set up without facing any kind of resistance. Obviously, the locals weren't happy with foreign people coming into their land and forcing them to change their ways. This would often lead to resistance and bloodshed. Colonizers would often disregard the culture and heritage of the local people. They would set up colonies mixing distinct and sometimes clashing groups of people together. Furthermore, they would often treat these people like second-class citizens and excluded them from participating in their own government. Colonizers would violate human rights, spread foreign disease, and create heavy instabilities in their colonies. Another negative of colonialism was the treatment of the environment. Colonizers would often take natural resources, some of which important to the local population, for themselves. They would destroy natural habitats to create space for farms and plantation. This created a culture that is still relevant in some post-colonial countries today, where natural resources would be brought and sold, and natural habitats would be destroyed for farms and plantations. It's impossible to talk about the effects of colonialism without bringing up the transatlantic slave trade. By the late 15th century, Portuguese ships were transporting North African slaves for use on sugar plantations in their colonies. Soon after, Spanish colonizers began transporting African slaves to the Caribbean, marking the start of the transatlantic slave trade. Other European nations such as the Netherlands, England, and France would also do the same. The African slaves used in the slave trade were often brought from warlords or tribes, or sometimes even taken forcefully. This led to rapid depopulation and created an atmosphere filled with unrest and violence, an atmosphere where people couldn't trust each other because of the fear of being sold out. Decolonization is a process in which colonies became independent from their host countries. There are many ways for colonies to become independent, the two main ones being through revolution or through the host country withdrawing. It's not uncommon to see nations fighting for their independence and being successful, such as the Americans in 1776 and the Haitians in 1781. But a majority of colonies gained their independence during the international period of decolonization, beginning in 1914 and ending in 1975. After World War II, many European superpowers lacked the wealth and resources to uphold their overseas colonies. They also faced challenges against the world's new superpower, the Soviet Union and the United States, both of which were against colonialism. Many colonies fighting for their independence would often appeal to the United States for support. The United States being a country which supports national self-determination and a country which was once a colony. The United States would often send support in the form of aid, technical assistance, or sometimes even military interventions. In 1946, the United Nations had 35 members, but as many nations gained independence from their colonizers, this number went up to 127 in 1970. These new members of the United Nations became vocal advocates for decolonization, pushing the United Nations towards accepting independence from colonial states and to work towards ending the colonialism era. Colonialism has greatly impacted the world in positive and negative ways. We can still easily see the mark and trails left behind from the colonialism era. What is your opinion on colonialism? If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. See you next time.